And then there were two. Nikki Haley has officially dropped her presidential bid, paving the way for Donald Trump to take the GOP nomination.
I am filled with the gratitude for the outpouring of support we've received from all across our great country. But the time has now come to suspend my campaign.
The presidential hopeful pushed her campaign through Super Tuesday, but with only 2 wins in Vermont and D.C., the writing was on the wall. What's next is a Biden versus Trump showdown. It's time to go on the record with Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science from Decision Desk HQ. Scott, thanks for joining us. We all knew this time would come for Nikki Haley to drop out because of previous results. Did her performance, though, reveal any weaknesses for Trump?
I think it did. I mean, we look at, she won in Vermont, which is interesting because the polling had Trump leading in Vermont, and she actually pulled off an upset. That's kind of the underreported story of the night. Obviously, Donald Trump's still going to be the nominee, but that was a surprise upset for her. And then let's look at one county I've been looking at. It's going to be representative of this fall. Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. It's a suburban, urban, right outside of Charlotte County, highly educated, middle income. And this is going to be representative of some of these battleground states in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. She did very well, and that's going to pose some problems for Donald Trump this fall because she appears to be doing well with those moderate, independent voters, suburban voters, and we'll see if Donald Trump can take some of those back.
Yeah, you've been saying for a few weeks now that you're watching Mecklenburg County, and it could be some sort of a bellwether, I think, going into the next election. So on that note, former President Trump is going to have to fight for GOP unity and unify the voters. Are there any signs that he's going to be able to bring Haley supporters onto his side after such a, I guess, nasty and vicious primary?
Well, I think there are, and there's different types of Haley supporters, right? There's the staunch GOP supporters, which I think he's going to be able to pull in the end, or at least the vast majority of them. And then in some of these open primaries, she's gotten some independents to vote for her. That the independents, by and large, are a lot more skeptical of Donald Trump. In 2016, the last time he won, he was able to win a significant amount of them. He did not win them in 2020, so we'll see what he can do now, but he's going to have some work to do there. And then Nikki Haley was able to get some Democrats, especially in these open primaries. I doubt Donald Trump's going to be able to get those, but if he's able to shore up those Republicans, as well as, get on the right side of majority on those independents, he's got a pretty good shot.
So speaking of Donald Trump polling in support, after a 3-year-long feud starting after January 6, 2021, minority leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, is throwing his weight behind Trump. The development came as Haley was dropping out, and even though she didn't endorse Trump, does that mean that the GOP is essentially coalescing behind Trump with this endorsement from McConnell?
It is, and I think if you're watching this closely, you were surprised. It was not a big secret that Mitch McConnell was not a huge fan of Donald Trump, especially after January 6th. And so the fact that he announced his support, as well as he's retiring at the end of the year, is a big sign of at least consolidation among GOP establishment. At least the DC GOP establishment. What it'll do for the average voter, I don't think the average voter really cares what Mitch McConnell is supporting. Even the Republican voters are not huge fans of him. But it is a sign that there is some coalition, some coalescing around Donald Trump, and certainly will wrap up some donors.
Right. And, you and your team were up all night, barely getting any sleep, crunching these numbers and looking at exit polling. Decision Desk got some exclusive exit polling showing key issues for both sides. 44% of Republicans voicing immigration as their number one concern. Break that number down for us.
So what was surprising on that one is, and again, these are voters who showed up and voted on Super Tuesday, which not a lot of voters do. It's still a low turnout event, even in these primaries, especially if it's contested. These voters, Republican voters, said, hey, we think immigration is even more important than the economy. And as you know, Julia, we've been polling for News Nation and The Hill for a couple of years now. Economy's been the leading thing, especially in and around inflation. To see immigration among the voters who show up, that tells you how salient it's going to be come this fall. And I think that was most surprising because it wasn't just an eke out win, number one issue. I mean, 20-30% more Republicans think immigration is going to be the issue. And you know what? It doesn't look like there's going to be a border bill. It looks like they're going to still fight about it. So immigration is going to be a thing.
So on the Democratic side, foreign policy, specifically the war in Gaza, has been a crux for the Biden administration. How are voters reacting to this, the war in Gaza, and will this eventually play a role in November?
Well, we were watching. There were a few states on the Democratic side that had the uncommitted vote, the option, very similar to Michigan, where the pro ceasefire, pro Gaza Democratic activists were pushing people to vote uncommitted in Michigan, as instead of voting for Joe Biden, to show their support for that. We were looking in places like Minnesota to see if they were able to recreate that. They got some votes, but I don't know that it's enough to really move the needle in some of these key states. We might have enough in Michigan. It's settled right around 10 or 12%. Even Rashida Tlaib came out and said, look, we need to send Joe Biden a lesson, but we're probably going to vote for him at the end, or when it comes to this November. So it's a good noisemaker. It's going to create some division, but we expected at least to Joe Biden to be able to get these voters back.
So Super Tuesday wasn't just about the presidential nomination. Other key races played out. What happened in North Carolina? We've been talking a lot about Mecklenburg County, but I know there were other races playing out.
Yeah, so there's quite a few races in and around at the congressional level. There's some interesting primaries. We're still counting and trying to figure out who won the lieutenant governorship on the Republican side. North Carolina is just a good melting pot, simply because it is a crossroads between the Northeast and the Southeast, and there's quite a few independent voters there. And the fact that we have a lot of close races at the House level and at some of these statewide tells us a little bit about what it's going to be like this fall. Joe Biden's trying really hard to win that state come this fall, and he might need to if he's going to lose a state like Michigan or not win a state like Georgia again.
So on the West Coast, California also had a U.S. Senate primary. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff elevated Republican Steve Garvey in that jungle primary. Is a Schiff victory all but certain in a deep blue state like California?
So as a long life California resident, and I don't live there anymore, and in the winters I wish I did. Yes, this race is over. Adam Schiff is going to win the Senate seat in California. He's just got to go through the motions for the next 6 to 7 months. If you're a political campaign junkie, you thought this was an interesting strategy, because both Adam Schiff and Katie Porter, both the Democrats in this, two of the biggest Democrats in this primary, spent a lot of money to lift Steve Garvey up. Steve Garvey didn't have any money, didn't have a lot of name ID, but both Adam Schiff and Katie Porter spent a lot of money to see if he could get into second, and they wanted him in second so they could actually ensure a Democratic win this fall, and it looks like it's going to pull it off.
So in Texas, Congressman Colin Allred won the Democratic contest to take on Senator Ted Cruz, a Republican, in November. Do you think this is finally the year that Texas turns blue?
So the answer to that is no. Colin Allred is a great candidate for the Dems. He's going to be able to fundraise. He's good on the stump. He's got a little bit of name ID in the state. Ted Cruz also good name ID in the state. He knows how to fundraise. But what's interesting to me, and this might help Ted Cruz, because considering he had a pretty close race with Beto O'Rourke last time he was up, is it looks like Donald Trump is doing very well with the Hispanic vote. Looks like Donald Trump could be getting anywhere from 25 to 30%, 5% of the Hispanic vote. And if he does, he's going to have some coattails inside of Texas that's going to help Ted Cruz really seal the deal there. So no, I don't think this is the year that the Democrats take a statewide office like Ted Cruz's seat.
So we can't forget about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s presidential candidacy. There's been speculation that he can join the Libertarian Party's presidential ticket. Do you think Haley supporters could sway towards RFK, or would this be a bigger concern for President Biden?
You know, it's interesting right now. I would say, and I've actually seen some interesting focus group material off this, is there are a lot of Democrats who just see RFK Kennedy and they say, oh, it's a Kennedy. I like Kennedy. I'm going to vote for him. They don't know a lot about him. They don't know a lot about his positions, but because he's Kennedy, they associate it with the Democratic name ID. So that's right. Right now, we're seeing him take away a decent amount from Joe Biden. The same focus groups also show us once these voters figure out what he's about, guess who he starts taking from? He starts taking from Republican voters, because he has some libertarian views. He has some conservative views. And so this is a long way of me saying is he takes voters from both sides. How he portrays himself and where he's on the ballot is really going to make a difference. The most appealing thing from the libertarian side is not necessarily the policy positions, but the Libertarian Party is on the ballot in a lot of states that he's not in. So if he joins that party, his name's going to be on the ballot, and voters are going to be eligible to vote for him in many states. And yes, if he's there, he's going to take from Republicans, and he might take from Democrats simply by having that Kennedy name.
Well, he's certainly going to keep everyone on their toes. You know, I want to go back to the uncommitted topic, particularly in Minnesota. It wasn't necessarily a landslide for Biden on Super Tuesday. 45,000 uncommitted voters flooded the polls in Minnesota. Do you think progressive voters this is a sign they're speaking up? And I think you alluded to this earlier, but that doesn't seem like a small number. I mean, do you think this could have any impact on the election, judging by what happened in Minnesota?
So my base case is no. I think it's interesting. They're highly organized people, right? If you show up in Minnesota and it was raining in parts of Minnesota last night, it was cold, and yet people still showed up, you're a committed voter. So you showed all the way up not to vote for Joe Biden, but vote uncommitted because you knew that was going to make some news or at least show where you're at. So those people are highly motivated, but they're also highly educated, highly attuned voters. They understand that if we get to October and all they have is Joe Biden at the top of the ticket and Donald Trump, they may not love Joe Biden, but they know that as a Democratic voter, he represents their views better than Donald Trump. So that's why I think when the rubber meets the road, these voters are going to come home and not necessarily hurt Joe Biden. But what they will do is create a whole lot of news and a whole lot of turmoil and force Joe Biden to take some positions and address their issues along the way, which is what they want. So it's going to be a story. It's going to be difficult. But when they get in those voting booths, I don't think Joe Biden's ultimately going to lose them.
Right. Well, Scott Tranter from Decision Desk HQ, thank you so much for joining us. And please get some rest in time for the Hawaii. What is it, a primary or a caucus?
It's a primary tonight, real late. I wish I could go live, but no, I'm here in D.C.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for What's America Thinking. Come back next week and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And we want to hear from you. Leave your comments and let us know what's on your mind.